Indigenous Peoples Day. Are currently on the Cherokee and Yuchi people's land, and I do want to remind you all that no one is illegal on stolen land. You can call me Kat. I currently sit on the Washington County Democratic Party's Executive Committee, and I represent District 9, which is Carver. That's my hood. And I am beyond excited to be back in the town of Jonesboro with all of you this evening. This town holds a very special place in my heart for too many reasons, actually. You may not know this, but my husband and I ran the historic 228-year-old historic. Thank you. And we made so many longtime friends here, and I actually got my first opportunity to volunteer and serve on a board or committee here in this town, which quickly, if you are from Jonesboro or are aware, it turns into many different boards and committees and many different organizations. That is the Jonesboro way. I acted, danced, and sang on stage at both the McKinney Center and also at the Jonesboro Repertory Theater. And I learned so much local history living here that is the part that I know I will never forget. There were so many forward thinkers here in this town, and there actually still are today. But I want to share with you a few of my favorite historical facts and stories. Let's start in 1842. Is anyone familiar with the Ford v. Ford case?
Yes!
Okay, thank you. So, to refresh or get everyone caught up, Farmer Lloyd Ford, his name is hard to say, Farmer Lloyd Ford, Sr., decided to will the freedom of his slaves and parts of his land to those that he had enslaved. This was against his children's liking. So when he passed, his children actually argued in court that the slaves had no right to bring that will forward. This case went all the way to the state Supreme Court, and it resulted in the freeing of his slaves, and they ended up granting them the land that was bequeathed to them in that will. Longer, happier ending is that those families, both black and white side of the Ford families, still meet together on that land and have family reunions. So that's a very good story. We could talk about the Warner Institute, which if that wall wasn't there, it is right on the hill, right behind you. That was the school for people that were manumitted from enslavement here in Jonesboro, and it was run by a woman named Julia Nelson. And I think we would all like Julia because she is quoted stating, "I do believe that a black heart is infinitely worse than black skin." And I agree with her. Or we could talk about Ella Russell. Is anyone familiar with Ella Russell? Okay, great, good. In 1896, she was a black woman that graduated from Howard Medical School. And she actually moved here to become an in-house nurse for someone, but she was the only hospital-trained nurse in East Tennessee for some time, and she actually treated both black and white patients. She was so successful and well-loved in the area that the person that she was the in-house nurse for willed his home to her in his passing, and she ended up selling that property. It was on Main Street. It was actually where The Emancipator was published years prior as well. But she sold that and moved back to DC. But that was a black woman in the late 1800s here in town. We also, and should also, always talk about the Schubert Club. Do we have any Schubert Club members in here? Is anyone familiar with the Schubert Club? Okay, hello. Their purpose was to promote literacy and music education within the town. They later helped to form the town's first library and also provide a librarian. That ladies group is still active, and I was actually a member of it for many, many years, and they are a wonderful group of women here in town. Or we could talk about the Women's women's suffrage movement and how in 1919, women here in Jonesboro and the surrounding areas packed out the old courthouse down the street to capacity just so that they could debate and eventually gain the right to vote in local elections the year before the 19th Amendment was ratified. Or we could talk about Grace Hawes, the first woman to ever be elected mayor here in Jonesboro, and how she paved the way for future women leaders like Toby Bledsoe and Virginia Causey. Also discuss the migrant march that came down Main Street in 2004 and showcased various flags of different countries. They marched down Main Street in celebration of their heritage and culture, and they were embraced and encouraged by their neighbors and local organizations. That was just like 21 years ago. That history is alive and well in Tennessee's oldest town, and very much so in my heart. And something that has always stood out to me in just a few of these stories that I obviously am biased and handpicked, is the undeniable presence of women's leadership. That's what makes Jonesboro the perfect place for someone like Jerri Green to grace this stage and let us help her make history.
Yes.
Yes.
Jerri Green is a mother of 3, a former public interest lawyer and senior policy advisor, and a current Memphis City Councilwoman, and she is running to be the next governor of Tennessee. She is the first Democrat to ever hold this seat and helped usher in the first female majority council by winning her runoff. She's a lifelong advocate for working families. She's raised wages for public employees, pioneered Tennessee's first free gun lock by mail program that cut gun thefts from cars by more than 20% in Shelby County.
Wow.
It's impressive. She expanded healthcare through free at-home HIV testing kits and added funding for Black midwives and championed youth mental health and pre-K expansion.
Wow.
She was raised in Memphis, educated in Knoxville, go Vols, and beginning her career in Nashville, she would be the first known governor to have lived in all 3 grand divisions of the state. Jerri has a proven record of delivering bold, common sense solutions in the face of extremist leadership. I think we need that right now. Now, she's stepping up to fight for Tennessee families, to fully fund public schools, expand access to health care, protect fundamental freedoms, and make history as Tennessee's first woman elected to governor.
I came all this way from Memphis and I know somebody in the crowd. Wow. There's a lot to unpack here in these mountains. There was a super donkey, there was already dancing, and I think you just gave half my speech, so I hope I can provide to what has already come before me. Thank you so much. I am humbled and honored that you have taken time out of your evening to be here with me tonight. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself that wasn't already covered, or maybe was already covered. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about why I know we can win this seat. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about what it's going to take from you. And then I'll do something that my opponent would never do. I'll take questions. Tennessee. Let me tell you what Memphis taught me. It's a place, Abby can attest to, of grit and grind, with a lot of stories of underdogs, right? There are a couple of guys named BB and Elvis that came with some dreams and left as kings. Yeah.
Yes.
There's this guy who got a failing paper, but he turned it into FedEx, which changed the whole world economy. And of course, I work down the street from the patients of St. Jude, where they and their doctors beat the odds every day. So, when people tell me that we can't win this race, I say, don't tell me that, I'm from Memphis. I left Memphis to go to college in Knoxville, yes, go Vols. Although that game on Saturday took me every year they take years off my life. The reason is this, look, I went to Knoxville at a time where I know we all have unrealistic expectations for how well they're gonna do, but I had a particularly hard time. Peyton Manning was there my first 2 years. Our third year we won a national championship. Hat Summit was there, winning all the championships all the time. So I kind of just think we should win all the time. And when we don't, or we get close to losing, it's very hard on me. But I'll tell you this, being around and seeing the examples of leaders, right, like Peyton Manning and Hat Summit, taught me a lot in college. They taught me that hard work pays off. You know, as talented as Peyton was, as great genetics as he has, they always also talked about the amount of time he put into the film room, right? Studying the game, trying to get better. And the same with Pat Summit. You know, her famous saying is, the way I'm gonna beat you is I'm gonna outwork you. That's it, that's the plan. And that's my plan too. The thing that I did in college, of course, was work way too hard. I did graduate with a couple of degrees in 3.5 years. I did college all wrong. But it meant that I got the chance to go to Georgetown Law School. I was actually there. Yes, you can applaud and make America smart again. I told someone yesterday, I think our state legislature passes more lawsuits than laws, so it might be nice to have somebody who knows the law there. But I lived in D.C. during some tumultuous times, including the last time we had the National Guard on those streets, because it was during 9/11. And even after somebody had flown a plane into the Pentagon, having tanks and men in fatigues with rifles on every corner did not make me feel safe, even if I understood why they were there. Now they're here on our city streets, in our own state, in my own city, and I really don't understand, and I definitely don't feel safe. I left DC to go to Nashville, and I had tried out a lot of different kinds of public interest law when I was in DC. I had done domestic violence work, landlord-tenant work. I'd even gone to Africa twice and done women's human rights work. But I fell in love with the public defender's office because it felt like to me where the rubber meets the road. And the thing was, I grew up really poor. My mom and I struggled. I know often we had cabbage and corned beef hash for dinner. You know, we've been joking on the campaign trail. They're saying that the price or the sales of Hamburger Helper are on the rise. We were a tuna helper family. Do you know what I mean? So I warmed myself by a stove, you know, after we cooked. That kind of poor. And I'll tell you one story about, this is how poor we were. The part of Memphis we lived in was not incorporated yet, and you had to pay for your garbage to be picked up, and we couldn't afford that. That was an extra expense. So we gathered up our garbage every week, and we would take it off behind this store, like a grocery store kind of thing. And one time, my mom and I were there dumping our trash like we did every week, and there was a homeless couple inside of the bin. It's probably about 5 or 6 years old. And my mom rushed me back to the car. I thought I had done something wrong. I had no idea what was going on. And she got back in the car, she held the steering wheel, she didn't even look at me, but tears were streaming down her face. And she said, don't you ever think that there's not somebody else out there that's worse off than you, that you can help. And I realize now, as an adult and as a mom, that of course, she knew how close we were to being in that bin. But it stuck with me, and it's why I became a public defender. I moved to Nashville I was very excited to be a public defender, but I also wanted to move back down south because in DC, nobody knows what sweet tea is or fried green tomatoes. And I was over that. So we moved to Nashville, and what I learned at the public defender's office is this: if you want to help people with their problems, you got to get right next to them and you got to listen. Unless you get proximate to their issues, you are not going to find the solutions. And so I want you to know that that baby in the back is not bothering me. I have 3 kids, and you are fine, and all of us love that you brought your kids here tonight. He's a great babysitter if you want him to take him and run around. I loved my work as a public defender because I felt like I was fighting for that underdog, just like me and my mom, just like the people I knew in Memphis. And that's what I wanted to build my career around. I also knew that I was very ill-equipped to fix the problems that I was seeing. One of the cases that sticks with me the most was a young boy who was about 13 years old. I was a baby attorney. Abby knows what a baby attorney is. It means we don't know anything, but we've been put in the courtroom anyway. And he was about 13 years old. His mom had been staying at home with his little brother. And she'd been out of work for so long that their utilities got cut off. It was December, it was cold, it was dark. So she kept Big Brother home to watch little brother in the cold and the dark, so she could go to work, so she could make enough to pay on her light bill. Big Brother, they live in public housing in this quadplex. He took an extension cord out of his window, went across the way to a neighbor's window, and plugged it in. He plugged it back into a TV and a space heater, and he set his sick little brother in front of it. He was charged with aggravated burglary and felony theft.
What?
I know. And do you know what me, as a little baby attorney, thought? How on earth am I going to fix this? All of the ways and places we have failed this mother, this child, his little brother, I know where they can't be fixed is in this courtroom. It certainly can't be fixed with him in an orange jumpsuit with 2 felonies at the age of 13. He needed a mom who could have a living wage. He needed a mom who could have utility assistance and a healthcare system that would take care of that little baby. And I know what you're thinking. You're like, who was the jerk who called the police? But understand that neighbor probably saw 2 kids sitting in the dark, in the cold. And what else was he supposed to do? And when the police arrived, what else were they supposed to do? They knew that they could either put 2 kids in DCS custody that night, or they could put the baby in DCS custody, and they could send that juvenile to detention for a night and maybe get hooked up with some services. That's the reality that people are facing out there. So that's what stuck with me, right? I wanted to be able to fight for these kids, to get them what they need, to pull them out of this system, but I knew that I needed to do more work on the system itself if I actually want to make a difference. Would I have stayed a public defender? Maybe. When I moved back to Memphis, I was a public defender against Abby. Abby was a prosecutor. We're not going to hold it against her. She was one of the good people.
I still am.
She still is. She was great. And we started on the Humane Society board together. She's a big rescuer, especially of kitty cats. So she's a special place in our heart. But I knew I would be in public service. You know, I left Georgetown. I could have been a corporate attorney. I could have made $100,000+ a year. That just wasn't for me. I wanted to give back. So I did that in some other ways. I helped run a nonprofit. I worked as a public interest counselor at the law school at the University of Memphis. But I'll tell you what made me ever stand up in a room like this after a super donkey. When we moved back to Memphis, my husband and I got engaged and we moved back to Memphis to start our family. And when I became a mom, my whole world broke open. There was no way that I could continue to let things be the way they were and just fight it one case at a time. That calling for making bigger systematic changes was no longer a theory, it was reality. When I first became politically active, I always voted. My mom always took me to vote. I always took them to vote, but really active was after the shooting in Newton, and those babies being killed in that classroom, and I had kids that age. And I thought, I can't sit on the sidelines anymore. I can't send my kids to school and pray that they come home. And it's reality, but I will tell you, he's been in multiple active shooter, not drills, actual active shooter lockdowns this year. All of my children have been in active shooter lockdowns. They learned to stand on a toilet in their preschool in case anybody was checking underneath the stalls. My daughter, when she was 7, got some brand new light-up shoes from her grandmother, and she was told, please don't wear those to school. They sent me a note home. It said, when we do active shooters, know that we turn off the lights, and the shooter might see her running for her life. 7. I said, no more can I sit on the sidelines. So I was maybe bullied into office, running for office the first time. They say you have to ask a man once, you have to ask a woman 7 times. They probably had asked me like 70. I'm being honest, because I had kids and I had a job and I was already giving back. But because of my work with Moms Demand Action, the training they gave me, I stepped up and ran in 2020, which was a weird year to run for anything because the whole world shut down. So all the things that you normally do, like have in-person events, go door knocking, all of that was off the table. The Democrat who had run before me had gotten only 30% of the vote. It was a known Republican stronghold seat. The person who was the incumbent had been there for a decade. He was the chair of the Education Committee. He still is. I got 47% of the vote in this crazy, crazy year of 2020. We moved the needle that much. You know how much we moved it? They redrew the map. They were nervous that I'd do it again. So I thought, well, that was an interesting thing. I don't know if I'll ever do that again, but it did lead me to some really great things. And the best thing it did was our county mayor, Mayor Lee Harris, saw my campaign and was impressed by it. He said, I want you to come work for me. At the windmills, I get to walk in and be like, how do we feel about solar panels now? I think windmills are done, you know? And he put me to work, and I did get to work on big things like our gun lock program that you talked about. We've given out over 2,000 gun locks in Shelby County, which is amazing. It costs $2 for a gun lock, $5 to mail it to anybody, $7 to save a life. And it doesn't only help the guns that are stolen out of cars and the violent crime that is related to that, but it also helps children who get a hold of guns they're not supposed to, because we unfortunately lead the nation in that too in Memphis, and people who are maybe going to commit suicide. We're seeing a rise in both our veterans and our teenage girls, and if they get a hold of a gun they're not supposed to, it makes it that much easier in their life. So I'm proud of that. I'm proud of how we've taken that model and moved it into our free HIV testing. We've already given out 1,700 HIV tests at home. It comes with a whole packet of information about like how you can get health care and where are some support groups and all that, because in Memphis, we're number 2 in the nation. You had all these signs earlier, so I'm gonna give you stats. We're number 2 in the nation in new incident rates, and it's highest among boys, 14 to 24, and higher among our queer community. Let me just tell you, I have a 15-year-old son, and if he was concerned about something like that, I don't even know as close as we are if he'd say, hey mom, I'd like to go to the health department and get tested. But this allows anybody to order this kit, and they can order it more than once, and to order it for somebody else. And that way we can start having people know their status and get on the medication they need to help stop the spread. That actually saves lives. Every bit of this work that I get to do are these big systematic changes. You know, we talk a lot in Memphis about crime. Of course, Abby and I used to work in it, but really, if you want to know how to stop crime, does anybody know what study after study what it says is the #1 way to stop crime? It's a job. A job. A living wage would help, but even just a job, right? So, number 2 is affordable housing, just FYI if you're wondering.
Yeah.
So here's what I've done on that front. I started a program in Shelby County government called Work to Break the Cycle. You can go there right now, worktobreakthecycle.com, and we will hire anybody day 1 as soon as they get out of prison and put them to work. salary that's a minimum of $40,000, and I fought for that too. And the reason that we do that is because, do you know when you're most motivated to not commit another crime?
Yeah, when you first get free.
Is right when you get out. And when you're most likely to commit another crime? Is right when you get out. So I'm not putting any barriers, and we have people who work in the health department, who work in sanitation, who work in our parks. We will put you to work. In that time that we've had this program up, we've hired 200 people with criminal histories, and we have had 0 recidivism. And sometimes it takes thinking outside the box, you know? Of course, our state legislature wasn't going to change our gun laws. Even when, in Memphis, we put them on a ballot and asked if we could be carved out, you know what they said? No. We're going to take your tax money and put that on the ballot. And we said, try. We'll sue you in court. Because you need to hear how many people want these things, like red flag laws, like safe storage laws, like not being able to carry an AR-15 near my kid's school. All of that, every single measure that we put on the ballot, passed with over 80%. I don't know if you've looked around the country lately, there ain't a lot we agree on 80%. Democrats and Republicans, card-carrying NRA members, people who own guns like me, people who've lost people to gun violence like me, we all agree that these were common sense measures. They didn't want to hear it. They wanted to threaten us. So we started a gun law program. I'm about to take that gun law program and push it even further. Our next step in this is we are going to have lock boxes and safes inside our churches. We are going to train our pastors to be able to receive the guns, no questions asked, and put them in those safes and then call the police. That way, we're going to be able to, the pastors are going to reach their flock is going to reach more people, and we're going to be able to get more guns off the street. But let me tell you the one problem with this, and how I'm going to get around it. Because again, if I can't go through the legislature, I'm going to go around it. The one problem is, do you know what happens if we have a gun buyback program, or if we get confiscated guns off the streets? Do you know what the state law says? It says you have to sell it back into the stream of commerce.
What?
Not you may, you shall. So, the good news is I have some friends at the Metal Museum. The only ornamental metal museum in the whole country is actually in the city of Memphis, and they're willing to let us donate these guns to them for art projects, where they're gonna melt them down. Say to somebody who had an assault rifle, he said, I have an AK-47 and I feel like I should no longer have it. You know, after watching all these school shootings, I think this is a dangerous weapon of war and I shouldn't have it anymore. I want to publicize a gun buyback, and I'll bring it out and I'll turn it in, and we'll bring press around it, and more people will turn their guns in. And I have to say, I need you to lock it up in the safe, because then I know it's safe. And it's not going to be used on anybody else, because right now if I take it, the state says I got to sell it to somebody. It's crazy. I know. Everybody's face every time I bring this law up.
It is.
It's beyond not common sense, it's nonsense, right? But that's what happens when you sign permitless carry inside a Beretta factory.
Right.
And that's where we are in this state. We have gotten so far away from what people want, from what people are having affect their lives. I've been traveling the state. Look, everybody look around right now. I'm gonna tell you this, one of y'all are gonna cry in my arms tonight. I don't know which one it's gonna be, but I haven't had to stop yet where somebody doesn't cry in my arms. And they're crying in my arms because they can't afford health care. They're crying in my arms because they're an immigrant from Britain and they're afraid to open their mouth and have somebody hear their accent. They're crying in my arms because they are pregnant, already mother of two, a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, and they got fired for something they said about immigration on Facebook of a job they've had for 18 years. They're crying because they can't afford to build their aunt a ramp after she had a stroke. And they are worried that they're not gonna be able to continue to carry her in and out of her trailer. But it's $3,000 and they can't afford it right now because they're a member of the sandwich generation, which means they have teenagers like mine that eat you out of house and home. And they're caring for an elderly person.
And so they don't have an extra $3,000 laying around, and Medicaid won't pay for it because we won't take the Medicaid expansion. That people are hurting, and we've gotten away from that. Gotten to a place where nobody is listening anymore. I promise you this, I'm from Memphis, I'm gonna fight for the underdog. I'm gonna put in every bit of work I can. Nobody's gonna outwork me in this race. And I'm gonna listen to you. That is my promise because that is who I am. And I am going to fight like one tough mother because that is why I'm in this to begin with. People ask me if I'm going to take money from APAC or corporate PACs or what. I'll tell you this, I do have special interests. I do. Their names are Bo, Vivian, and Wilder. That's Bo over there, he's 15. Vivian is at home because she has soccer tournaments this week. She's 14. And Wilder is 8. And all of them are why I care about if we have clean air and clean water. They are why I care about if my daughter has the same rights I had over her body. They are why I care about if we are infusing our economy in a way that makes them be able to raise their families with dignity. I want them to be able to go to school here and then get a job with a living wage and be able to support their families. That's why I care about this. So here's what I want to tell you that I would do if I was governor right away, that I think will have an impact on our families. Because, like the shirt says, families over billionaires. Number one, we're going to defund this voucher scheme. Private schools you're going to be paying vouchers to. And in Memphis, in a place where we have a lot of schools, first off, Bo goes to a public school, so I do actually care. He actually goes to my high school, White Station, go Spartans. But I care about it, and I believe deeply that these small towns are being robbed of public school dollars. On top of that, in places like Memphis, all we're doing is welfare for the rich. You're looking at the numbers that are coming out, and in the suburbs, in the places like outside of Memphis, they're getting 3 times the number of vouchers as the kids in the inner city. And you know why? Because $7,500 doesn't pay for private school tuition. And in every state where they have tried this scheme, every single state, you know what has happened? The learning level has gone down.
Yeah.
So if you actually care about kids, and I'm not sure they do because they're defunding the Department of Education.
Yeah.
But if you actually care about kids and you care about our education system, there is no way you can justify it. And Cameron Sexton says he's going to double it next year, and Marshall Blackburn's out there tweeting saying, great idea. No more under my watch. Absolutely not. We are not going to do vouchers. The number 2 thing that we're going to do is we're going to accept the Medicaid expansion money. Communities behind our rural hospitals, behind the economic ecosystem that goes with the hospital. Again, we talk about those moms that want their kids to stay in town. Well, if they could be a doctor, a nurse, an administrator, they can run the lunch counter next door, they can own that scrub shop down the street, whatever it is, there's a whole economy around that hospital. And, by the way, it saves lives. And you know how I know how important that is? This is really personal to me. I told you my family is from a rural town in Arkansas. I was born and raised in Memphis. I was born in Memphis because we didn't have a hospital in Arkansas. They came across the river, had me, and my mom and I moved back there when I was 4 years old. But when my parents got divorced, my dad stayed in that small town, and he was a carpenter, he was a builder, he built things with his hands. But he also died on the work site because he was an hour and a half away from any hospital. He had a stroke, and he could not get seen quick enough. It was 3 days before his 60th birthday. I get it. And I'm a mom. right? I've given birth 3 times and I've had 1 miscarriage. And let me tell you something, every single time I needed a doctor nearby. I talked to an OBGYN yesterday, and she told me, first off, they were having a hard time filling their 4 slots for OBs at their hospital. They can't get people to stay. They all leave the state because of the crazy laws that they're forcing. And they're worried about whether they can even do IVF, much less, like somebody has a miscarriage. Understand that when you have a miscarriage and you have the procedure, it's an abortion. Everybody needs to understand.
That's right.
It's the exact same procedure. And if they feel like they can't do that for you in the case of a miscarriage, you can bleed out or go septic or die. Don't tell me you care about families.
Yeah.
Don't make heroes of mothers taking care of their children when you won't take care of them to get to birth. That is not pro-life. Since we're gonna have all this money from the vouchers and all this money from the ACA, I should mention we do also sit on, billions of dollars in a rainy day fund, and I don't know if anybody's driven around lately, but it feels like Noah's Ark out here. But since we do actually have the funds to do it, the third thing that we can do to really help families right now is repeal the grocery tax.
Oh.
I'm in the grocery store every week.
Really?
Actually, my husband went to Costco because we have a teenager. That boy the other day, it's amazing. I'm not making this up, y'all. At Costco, they make bagel bites in 48 bagel bites. He was making them all for breakfast. I was like, are we having company? They were just for him. My husband went to Costco, and I went to Walmart after that to get our weekly groceries. And he was like, what did you buy at Walmart? And I was like, not diamonds. Wasn't any, it was food and laundry detergent. He's like, well, I already bought a lot of stuff, but it was, I said, well, what did you buy at Costco? Did you get a new big screen TV? Nope, it was food. There's no reason that we should continue this regressive tax on people when they're already struggling, especially when we're canceling SNAP benefits.
Yeah.
The food lines are getting longer and longer. There's one near me in Memphis that is there. It's been there since COVID times, and it has been 2 miles long, and it just keeps getting longer. People get in line at 7 o'clock in the morning, and it goes till 3 p.m. I know, I've worked it. It's not going to get better under this administration. So that's what we've got to do day one. Because your budget, it's a moral document. You show me yours, I'm going to show you what you care about. I will give you all my platform, and I will when I take questions, but if you want to find out more, it's on my website, and we have laid out a bunch of other details. But I want to tell you about how I think we can win and what I'm going to need from you. We are going to have to turn out our blue dots.
Yeah, that's right.
I think, personally, having someone from Memphis is good. No offense to all the white men in Nashville, but we do keep doing that, and it seems not to be working. There's a poll out there that says Marsha beats a generic Democrat by 19 points, and I was like, well, great, I'm not generic. We are going to have to move our suburbs, and when I say move them, I don't want you to think that we're going to have to take them from bright blue to ruby red to bright blue. That's not how you do it. The way that I won my seat, which is right on the edge of Memphis, was through a runoff and with 56 votes, and turned that seat Democratic for the first time in 200 years in Memphis. Wow. So I took it from pink to lavender. Right? We got to do that everywhere too. Moms that are fed up with sending their kids to school and praying they come home. Business people who are tired of watching their workers flee because we don't have a living wage here and we don't have a good quality of life. All of that in the suburbs, we've got to talk to those people. And then in the rural places, in the hollers, in the mountains, I'm gonna keep showing up to remind you that we care and that we want to work for you too. We are going to have to, in places like this is an incredible turnout. If y'all all brought like 5 friends to the polls, I feel like we got this, man. But it's gonna take all of you, and I'm not saying all of you do everything, right? Some of you may phone bank, some of you may knock doors, some of you may deliver yard signs, some of you may wear your t-shirt to the grocery store so that somebody can say, who's that Jerri Green? You can follow me on social media, you can retweet or share, you can push out our message in a million ways that I can't, right? We'll text bank, we'll write postcards. I'm gonna need every one of you to do all of that. And then I'm gonna need you to show up at the polls, and I'm gonna need you to bring 5 friends that vote for us. Those other ones, stay home. And look, that's actually what's happening. If you look around the country right now, in ruby red Iowa or Virginia, like all of these places, right? What we're seeing in these special elections are swings to the Democrat between 10 and 20 points. In fact, right here in Tennessee, in Congressional District 7, we saw a 14-point swing. 24% of the vote. At 14%, we win. When Marsha ran against Gloria Johnson, Gloria got 34% of the vote. It's neck and neck. I'm telling you, we can do this. But it's going to take all of us. We can. Yes, Carol. But I know the hardest thing for you right now is to take the leap of faith. And I know that because I've traveled across the state. And I'll sit here in a crowd like this and people will cheer and clap. And they'll be like, first question, it's a really red state, how are we gonna win? You know? And I'll say, the first thing you've got to do is believe that we can win.
That's right.
If you don't have the muscle memory of ever voting for Al Gore or McWhorter, understand this is not a ruby red state. And let me tell you, traveling across this state, what I have seen in tiny little places, Rowan County, we had 300 people show up. Loudoun County, we had 150 people show up. Waverly, Tennessee, we had 200 people show up. Paris, Tennessee said, our Democratic Party used to be 4 people. We packed a room with like 50 people in it. People are mad, they are energized, they are ready for change. And they're not just sitting on the sidelines and tweeting about it, they're showing up in their community centers, in their town halls and saying, how can I help? We've got to capture that energy and push it out. So the first thing you've got to do is believe. And that takes faith. So let me say this. The Republican Party does not have a monopoly on faith. I went to Second Baptist Church on Walnut Grove, and it taught me a lot of things. It taught me to love my neighbor, which means you don't cut their SNAP benefits or make their health care premiums rise. It taught me to welcome the stranger, which means you don't tear people's families apart with masked armed men. And it taught me one more thing. It taught me a story about a little kid named David who was outmatched, who had not the size, not the strength, not the weapons that Goliath did. And there was just no way that he could win. Everybody knew that. They already knew it before he stepped out there on the field. But it turns out he did win. And he won with just a slingshot. You all, you're my slingshot. I'm the one standing up here, but I have all of you behind me. And together, all of us can change Tennessee. I mean it. Do you believe?
Yes.
Do you believe we can win this election? Some things that I can't predict or can't give you answers, but I can tell you this. I'm going to lead with a heart and a backbone. So like when Bill Lee rolls over and lets National Guard troops into our state, I'll say hell no. So exciting when you see someone you know.
I was very excited that you were coming to Jonesboro. I couldn't believe it. And I refused to believe that's Bo,
That's absolutely.
because I remember when you were pregnant with him.
Yeah, so we worked together when I was pregnant with him. That's how long
Yes.
it was.
I'm not that old.
Right.
Um,
We were teenager prodigy attorneys.
Yes, we were
Babies.
babies.
Baby
Absolutely
attorneys, that's what I
babies.
told y'all.
Yes. And we did work together. We were on opposite sides, but that's something about Memphis. We could be adversaries in the courtroom, but be buddies on the outside. And she and I worked well together. We also worked on the cold case task force with the city when we had the untested rape kids. And think about, I am a prosecutor here in Washington County, and I am primarily responsible for the prosecution of crimes against kids. So I do a lot of work with Department of Children's Services. We have some wonderful people that work with our kids here in Washington County, but we have a shortage of foster homes. So what we see in East Tennessee, not just Washington County, is a lot of our kids are being placed in DCS offices. Not just in Washington County, but all over the state. Our kids that are going into these offices are not getting education, they're not getting therapy, they're not even getting proper nutrition. And in my opinion, this is coming out of Nashville. And DCS needs help. And I would like to know, if you know today, but I would like to know what can be done with DCS to help our kids. Because our kids are not being served. And these kids are so vulnerable that we're dealing with every day.
It's so interesting that you bring that up, Abby, because I wish I could call y'all all by name. But because I was just having this conversation with some of my colleagues in the county. I get a report every day of what's happening with the Memphis Safety Task Force, and they keep saying like 10 juveniles missing recovered. And I'm looking at their ages, and what I know, because again, I was a juvenile public defender, is that these are runaways, and they're likely runaways from group homes or from the office. And if Pam Bondi scoops them up, do you know where they're going? Back to the office. And so, great job for getting them off the street. My assumption is that they are going around and they see someone who looks young out in the middle of the day when they should be at school, and they say, hey, who are you? And they figure out who they are, and they scoop them up and they put them on the floor of the DCS office. That does not stop crime, that does not help the kids, okay? So I've actually been working and thinking on this prior to today, so good question.
Thank you.
We do have to have different leadership at DCS, is my opinion. I do think the caseworkers that go into this work, it is a calling and they care. I'm not trying to lay this on their laps, but they need to be better paid and they need to be better resourced.
Yeah.
We've got to have wraparound services for these kids. And we are gonna have to figure out a way to incentivize good foster families, right? Not everybody can foster. I've definitely seen that in my life too. But good foster families, if there are, in Memphis, we've given a lot of money to a group called Pure Academy. It's sort of a boys group home. They have their own high school, they have their own football team, and they teach them how to tie a tie and other kinds of skills. And every time they come in front of me, you know what I say to them? When are you open up the girls' version of this, right? Because we can't leave them behind. But we could fund more programming like that too. That can absolutely be in your budget. You know, every single thing that you look at in the budget, they're giving corporations and businesses big tax breaks, right? And if you have that money instead, what you can do is put a mental health counselor in every school, right? So even those kids who are in DCS custody can receive some mental health supports right there in their school. So there's a lot of different ways and places. The number one thing you have to do is have the money, and the way that you get the money is stop giving tax breaks to big business and start supporting families, children in need.
Have you heard about ballot health?
Yes.
Yeah.
Ballot health is the way to win in District 1. That's the way you unite people.
terrible, right? That's what I
It's
hear.
been the biggest disaster
Yep.
for us here.
Yep.
You know, we're losing, Johnson City, the biggest city in this area, in this district, 75,000 people, we no longer have a colorectal surgeon in our city. Because they've left because Ballot Health is such a disaster. So that's the big thing, between that and the you know, not funding Medicaid, TennCare, is what we're dealing with here. And everybody hates it, and that's the way that.
Well, I've heard very terrible reviews about that particular healthcare system. I actually was talking to somebody yesterday that has sleep apnea, and he said he can't get anybody within 100 miles. Again, because, you know, there's just a dearth of care here and a dearth of options. Again, we've got to be putting more money. Healthcare is a right in my eyes. And that goes for physical health and mental health, okay? I think both of those things need to be funded. I'll tell you, so on the city council, one of the things I worked on with our police force was to get their on-the-job injury stuff to cover mental health injuries. Because I've buried 4 police officers in my 2 years on city council, and the person who was standing next to one of them didn't get shot, so she had to show up at work the next day. And I said, hey, she might need a mental health week or 2, especially if she's gonna have a gun and be arresting people. And I talked to my HR department at the city, and they were like, well, you have to actually be injured, like have been shot or have a bullet, something. And I said, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I said, in fact, I'd rather you like be winged in your arm than have something that traumatic happen, right? And I said, and the last time I checked, your brain is part of your body. So it can be injured. You can measure it on a CAT scan. I don't know when this policy was written, but we need to reconsider it. And so I asked her, I said, I want you to bring me in some cases of where you rejected this, where I know people, you know people needed mental health supports, they needed time off. Because we need to be giving people, especially our first responders, that time to recover. It might cost money, but mental health is health. She brought me a story about a state trooper or a trooper on our highway that had, was working a car accident and got hit by another car and lost his leg. And his partner had to pick up his leg and put it in the car and drive it to the hospital. But he didn't get time off work. And I said, okay, so again, you can watch this crowd. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand that's not okay. So we've got to make sure that we're putting funding both into physical health care and into mental health care, especially, I think, in our schools and with our kids. A big fancy locker room, and that it's going to help students who can't afford it. So I think there's definitely ways and places that we can do that. I also would like to, I would like to say that we can encourage work study. I did work study when I was in college. I took notes for people who had disabilities. It was great because I'm such a nerd. That meant I got to take a class without having to take a test. But I know, I'm a giant nerd, people. But I also think now that like that job must be obsolete because they can just like put a phone out and record and it'll turn into notes for them and then probably highlight and bold and all that. But I love that job. But there are work study programs. I should also say, college isn't for everybody.
That's right.
And so we need to make sure we're supporting the people that need to have apprenticeships, especially with our unions, so they can learn a trade where they can join a union and get benefits and a good-paying job. I also, if you go to my website, you'll see part of my education platform is to support a public service year. So the idea is if you're giving back to your community in some way, whether it's a library worker or a firefighter, if that's your entry into this, you're learning on the job, then I want to be able to give you funds to help live. Thanks for bringing the fellas out tonight. Aww. is guess kids' ages. I'm getting to be like a carny at it. Yes, ma'am.
Hey, Ms. Jerri, first I wanna say thank you for coming to this area and also for actually taking questions. I'm a homeless outreach coordinator, so what I do is actually, I'm on the street talking to the folks that are unhoused right now. Our biggest, absolutely, mental health is huge. I mean, that is a huge issue. I do wish that we had more mobile mental health units that would go around with our local police or even folks like me that go and just talk to them. But our biggest problem that we have is affordable housing. And I mean that across the board, because not only families, we all need affordable housing, but elderly, I'm talking 50 and above, we've got so many, we're housing a fella in 2 days at 70 years old. His wife died, there's so many people that end up out here and there are so many elderly. When you draw like $946 a month, and the fair market value on one bedroom is $1,100, it just doesn't make sense. We need affordable housing for all. We definitely need affordable housing for our mentally challenged and our elders. And I was just wondering, and that's even in the next stage, like once they need nursing homes. There's no housing like nursing home, or for mentally challenged folks. What is your thoughts on that? Like, how would you address that?
Again, this is mostly a budgeting thing. So we have a housing authority. We have the ability to give people housing vouchers, rental support. There's not a state in the country where on minimum wage you can afford a one-bedroom apartment.
That's right. Oh, that's
So I met a girl actually the last time we were in East Tennessee. Sadly, she had just come out and she was living with her family and working in the family business, and they were going to put her out on the street. And what she came to me and said is, I can find a job, but I can't find a job that helps me afford a house. And she just cried in my arms. And I first said, you're loved, you're fine, you're going to find your people. And I pointed her, I need you to take it one bite at a time. So whatever that bite is, if it's saving up for first and last, and you gotta stay on a friend's couch, that's also being unhoused, by the way. But it's overwhelming, like you said, for the elderly to the youth. So again, this is something that, and you know what else is crazy? If you are living in poverty, but you're going to college, you can't get housing vouchers? Like, we disincentivize people from getting a degree. How does that make any sense? See, these are things we can change. So there are ways and places. This is mostly a funding issue. We also need to put funding into places and organizations like yours that fill in the gaps. We have a great place in Memphis called The Hub. We have a union mission, and they help fill in the gaps. I know a lot of churches do that as well, and do that sort of outreach. I did actually help work with our mayor. We have 2 full-time mental health counselors that are on call for if, like the other night, if we need someone to come out and help us with the schizophrenic. And then we also gave funding to our local mental health hospital so that our police can go drop them off there instead of dropping them off at our jail. Now, I will tell you this, my guy was in a wheelchair because he was a double amputee, and they didn't want to take him because they said his wheelchair was a weapon. So we had to take him to a different hospital. But that's okay, because then I went and yelled at the first hospital and their board and said, you're not going to get any more government money if you can't comply with ADA. Turns out, they love wheelchairs. One tough mother, right? Really, thank you for what you do. And I want to say, I'm in particular very disgusted that in Memphis they're saying that men in fatigues with guns are going to help our homeless population. It's absolutely terrible. We're doing everything in our power to ask them not to do that and to keep them on. Actually, we have a river that's full of tires that we're asking them to clean up instead. We're going to put them to work doing something. We don't want them interacting with homeless people. We'd rather them be out there cleaning up our environment. Right. You got
2019. Used to drive a Tesla, but don't do that anymore. We've got 3. I've got an old 74 Beetle that's been converted to electric. I drive electric, my wife drives electric. And we want to eventually put solar panels on our house. The problem is, it feels like Tennessee wants to punish people who just want to make the world a little bit better. Currently, it costs us $600 a year to pay our registration fees on our car. That's going to go up to about $1,000 here in a couple of years. You know, we don't have things like net metering for solar, so it doesn't make sense unless you have the money to throw down on a huge system. You can't incrementally do things to improve your life. So I'm wondering, what can we do as a state to kind of stop picking on people who want to make the world incrementally better?
Yeah, that's fantastic. I can't wait to be converted your VW Bug. I had a 73 VW Bug, navy blue, white interior. Her name was Smurfette when I went to Georgetown Law School. And I used to have to go through, they still had like emissions checks, and they made me physically go there with my Bug to be like, yeah, converting that costs more than your car. So good for you for actually putting in the work. So the main thing that you can do, that we can do as a government is, like you said, the registration fees. We don't have to make it harder. And in fact, some of the regulations they put in are hurting what's happening at Blue Oval. So they're like, you're discouraging people from moving on to new technology. So we can also stop doing that. But I think the registration fees is where you'll see the biggest bang for your buck. And in that, now solar's harder, especially if you're doing it, like you said, one off here or there on a house. The best way that I can work as a governor is to incentivize local governments to do what we did in Shelby County, which is to create a solar farm to pay for the energy, even if it's just for one of their buildings. So we actually have a powering 2 of our buildings. And so being able to do that, you know, there's a school in Arkansas that put them on their roof, and the teachers all got a raise because they saved so much money. So there are ways and places that you can incentivize local governments, local schools to do things like that.
We're going to just take one more question, and then we're going to have reception. So just one more.
Yes, you can come take pictures, but not with a big scary camera like that one.
Thank you for being here. So look forward to seeing you in Bloodville tomorrow.
That's right, y'all come out at 11 o'clock, Alex. We're having coffee in Bloodville.
Yep.
Info on
Foxton in Bloodville.
Foxton.
So many, if not all of us here, understand the political industrial complex and how that's funded, super PACs, et cetera, et cetera. We also know that the U.S. Senator who we invited to stand on that stage a couple of months ago when we filled this room, and she didn't quite show up to answer questions that we had for her, gets a lot of her campaign funding from out of state. And so my question is, can you teach us a little bit more about how campaign funding will work for you, and how we, in addition to buying a shirt and make a donation on a monthly basis, is there the Democratic National Committee or any other funding that can be leveraged by how we do our campaign support of you?
I mean, this is the best final question ever. He asked me.
Trying to find your money.
You might be my favorite member of the audience. Yes, please donate. I am not taking, like, people keep asking about APAC or J Street. That's not going to be me. You're not going to find me taking money from pharmaceutical industries, from charter school voucher programs, from Big Pharma. So I'm behind the 8 ball. So my donors right now are all individual small donors. We have donors from over 100 different cities and towns and hollers across Tennessee. And they range from $1, because a woman gave me $1 and she said, I wanted to help you meet your goal, but I don't get paid till next week, but I want you to know I'm making it recurring, because I'm gonna help out. I tell you what, it meant more to me than a $2,000 check. But I could use a $2,000. In case anybody's wondering, the maximum is $5,300 per individual, $10,600 per couple. If you have a PAC that is just for supporting good, strong women like my PAC, they can give us $15,000. So
There are other ways and spaces that we can get money. I am hopeful that local parties, that groups like Indivisible and others get involved, and even if you're fundraising for yourself, what you're fundraising for is get out the vote. And that you're activating your community. I love the billboards, don't get me wrong, but if you're making lit and knocking doors, and you can grab some of ours while you're there and pass it out, fantastic, because that's gonna help us reach more voters. So there are ways and places. Now, TNDP, the DCCC, all of those don't get involved until after a primary. Our primary is in August. I gotta keep making these road trips between now and then. I wanna get up on the air before then. There are other people in this primary. Not serious people. I say that nicely. I actually met one of them yesterday. He goes by Ditch. He's a country music singer. That's about all I can say about that. There's a woman out of Memphis named Cardita Atwater. She sort of always runs for something, but you can't take her for granted because her last name starts with an A, right? Yeah. First on the ballot. And then there's some other guy whose name I really can't remember, but he's never voted in the state of Tennessee. Point is, and people could still jump in, right? The deadline hasn't passed. The point is, I got in early because I wanted to put in the work early, talking to people, figuring out how I could help them. I hope that people will respond in kind. And every donation goes back into our campaign. Every bit of it is helping us take road trips, helping us talk to voters, helping us build out our staff. That's what we need right now is, people who can help us. Lovely volunteers are great, but we need staff at all our places. If I could still Terrell and have her be my bag man, she's such a bulldog back there. She's like, y'all leave her alone at her wrist. I would pay her to do that everywhere I go. But truly, we're going to need, at some point, we're going to need paid door knockers, right? At some point, we're going to need ads on TV, and we're going to need to make the ad. And then we're going to need to pay to get it on TV. We're going to need radio ads. We're going to need to be in newspapers. I decided today, actually, I've always been against billboards, and then I saw how many people were at that Buc-ee's in Sevierville, and I said, we gotta buy 3 billboards around here. That's gonna be 50,000 people every day.
That's true.
I'm kinda not joking. So all of that matters. The thing about donations I would say to you right now is there's no amount that's too small to make a difference. And if you can make it recurring, it's even better, because that means we can count on it every month. So look in your heart tonight, tomorrow, whenever, and say, can I skip a coffee once a month and give $5? Can I skip a meal out and give $25? Do I really want to step up and be a big supporter, because democracy is failing at the moment, and I care about it, and I want to give 200 or more. All of it matters, all of it's going to help us get across the finish line. We will certainly leverage partnerships if and when we get to that point after the primary.
We will.
But that's when all of that really kicks in. And that's hard, because then you have to already have the skeleton built, right? Of where your campaign offices are gonna be, and who's gonna be the head staff rattle, and who's gonna be in charge of phone banking, and who's gonna be in charge of door knocking. You kinda gotta have that all laid out, and then you gotta spend all that money from August to November. So what we're building now builds us to that. And that is important, because understand, whether I go against John Rose or Marsha Blackburn, they're gonna have more money than sense. We know it. We already do. But I'm not in this to get wealthy. You're not giving to me. You're giving to us, to make this state better, to make it different. So really, truly, get a t-shirt, get a yard sign, all of that, or just give a donation. But make sure that regardless of what you do tonight, that you stay involved with us. And I'll end on this. Go to greenforgovernor.com, find us on, I hate social media so much. I'm 47 years old. We're on X, which used to be Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Y'all got me on Blue Sky and TikTok. Find me, you see my eye rolls, I hate it so much. But come out there, find us, share our message, and continue to help us build this momentum. Definitely come out tomorrow, tell your friends that couldn't make it tonight to come and have coffee with us tomorrow before I trek all the way back to Memphis. So I gotta get back home to be able to be a part of our No Keys Day, right? Thank you.